story actually begins on 12/10/94 when in my local newspaper, the Appeal Democrat, they listed all of the Unabombers bombings to date from May 25th, 1978 to December 10, 1994, with the last bomb being to Tom Mosser in North Caldwell, New Jersey. And then off of the newspaper article, I was able to notice that certain things jumped off the page at me. Obviously, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you're saying things jumped off the page at you. Are you referring to your knowledge and experience in deciphering code, cryptology? In the military, what was your job in the military?
Spent approximately six and a half years in U.S. Air Force intelligence, working for the National Security Agency at top secret locations. Even the names of the places I was at were top secret at the time. You couldn't even say them. And my main function was I was a senior control intercept operator. And as the control intercept operator, I had like 20 intercept positions under me, and it was approximately 40 airmen, 2 to each position. And our main function was to intercept coded messages, whether they were encrypted or in plain text, from all the nations in the world, mainly Russia, North Korea, South Korea, China. It was diplomatic messages, it was military messages, it was messages from military personnel to their significant others, whatever we could intercept to determine and get ahead of our enemies, to make sure that they weren't planning a major strike on the U.S.
And why was this case, why did you become so involved in this case over a period of years and devote so much time to this particular case?
Well, the main thing with the cryptology issues within the military is that I got to a point where I was able to read intercepted. I would run through the frequencies, pick up on a signal, put the signal through the equipment. The equipment would put it into a teletype machine. It was as the senior operator, I was slated with the job of determining where the country of origin of the signal, what decipherment palette or what decipherment piece of equipment I needed to put into the teletype machine, where the intercepted equipment would read into plain text English, whether it was going to be enciphered or just in plain text. If it was enciphered, it would come out looking like garble, and then I would get an analyst, and between the analyst and myself, and looking at the sheets as they were coming off the teletype, we would be able to determine what country it was coming from, if we had the right palette in, and eventually we would be able to determine and decipher that piece of messaging.
Right, but with this particular case, you were no longer with the military.
Right.
But you picked this case up because what sparked your interest in this case?
Well, because of my background in military intelligence and being able to pick things off the pages on the teletype, I in turn saw this chronological article in the newspaper, and I was also able to pick off things from this article that I knew that I could put into a charting system to help me decipher and hopefully get a method of operation for this particular bomber. And I was also of the knowledge that at this particular time, this guy had bombed for like approximately 16 years, and the FBI hadn't had a clue as to who the guy was, where the guy was from, or how to even catch this guy or identify him. So I made it a point that I was going to do everything I could to try to help them identify and capture this individual, because he was a very serious guy to deal with. He was a major serial bomber that had put the entire United States on notice, because he could bomb anywhere, anytime he wanted to. And nobody had a clue who he was or where he was and when he was going to bomb next. So I was trying to determine his method of operation, and I figured if I could determine his method of operation, I could possibly get ahead of him in some way. And I knew from military intelligence that one of our main object was always to be one step ahead of whoever the bad guy was and whatever their plans were to destroy the United States. So I just set it within myself and within my mind that I was going to do what I could to try to do this. And so after going over the chronological listing in the newspaper, I took the information from the newspaper and I applied it to some charts. And my very first chartings, I broke down different things within the article, whether it was placed or mailed, whether it was to a business or a university, whether it was to the East Coast or the West Coast, whether it was a bomb that was outside or inside.
So you were developing patterns, right? You're trying to find patterns.
Trying to find patterns.
Right.
And and from that, my results were I made up 16 charts, and once I had completed the 16 charts, it aided me in determining and trying to get ahead of this guy, determining his MO and getting ahead of him, so that I could determine when and where his next bomb might be.
Right. And we had a bombing in 1995. Can you tell me a little bit about that one in Sacramento?
Yeah. The next bomb after the Thomas Massa bomb in North Caldwell was to Gilbert Murray on 4/24 of 95. And my predictions had shown that it was going to be in June or July of 95. But for the fact that on 4/20/95, Nichols and McVeigh bombed the Oklahoma Federal Building in Oklahoma City. And so myself and others in the FBI Unabomber task force out of San Francisco, we all felt that maybe the 4/24 bomb was a statement bomb in reply to the Nichols-McVeigh bomb, simply because the Unabomber was still out there and somebody that we had to deal with, and McVeigh and Nichols were caught shortly after the bombing, within a matter of a few days or whatever it was, from what I remember. And so therefore, it being a statement bomb and not a scheduled bomb, that kind of nullified the fact that I might have been mistaken with my calculations that it was going to be in June or July of 95 and not in April. Okay, so that having happened, then shortly right after that, I mean, you might explain to me how it was I got involved with the
Sacramento PD.
Sacramento PD and the that bombing there.
Right. Well, I was in Sacramento at the time. That bomb,
Gil Murray bombing.
Right, and that was I was there, and close proximity when the bomb actually went off, and they cordoned off the area. But I found out there was a detective in the Sac PD named Joseph Enlow, and we'd been friends and we grew up together in the north part of Sacramento, and I contacted him, and he gave me a lot of information on what he could. And then knowing you were involved in this investigation and you were trying to put some facts and figures together, my next thing was to contact you, because you devoted a lot of time to this and now it's going to be in a situation, pre-events and all the events that transpired. So I notified you, and then we made arrangements to meet with him, and that's how it all started. You got involved.
John notified me on the afternoon of the bombing, 4/24/95. And we were going to meet up the next morning with the Sacramento PD at about 8 o'clock in the morning at their homicide division's headquarters. And John and I met with Detective Lieutenant Joe Enlow that very next day, and we went over a few things. And as a result of that meeting, we decided to. I let the Sacramento homicide detectives know that I had other information that I would like them to see, and we set a further date to meet up, and that was on or about May 1st, 1995, and we met up in my hometown of Yuba City at the local library. I had reserved a room, set aside a room for us, and I brought all my chartings, all my paperwork, all my calculations, and I met with Enlow, Garner, J.P. Morgan from Federal Protective Service, and Hartman from Federal Protective Service Investigations, and at the Sutter County Library, and discussed all my charts and paperwork with them. And from that point on, Detective Enlow was basically hooked. He gave me 4 letters that were received by the FBI and Lieutenant Enlow. The first letter he gave me was dated January 25th, 1995, and it was just addressed to Dear Sir or Madame, and signed off by Anders C. Greenwood.
Is there any significance in that name?
Yeah, this is one of his pen names that I guess that was associated with the Unabomber, or that's what the San Francisco Unabomber Task Force told me, that these letters were proven to be sent by the Unabomber to them, and this is one of his signatories that he was using. Anna C. Greenwood, 102 August Street, Hamden, Connecticut, 06517, and then there was some phone numbers, and an email at the bottom.
Did any of those phone numbers prove to be factual? Do you know?
That's another part of an investigation. They asked me to look into it at a later date, and it was for me to look into and determine if any of the phone numbers, I could determine whether any of the phone numbers meant something other than what was on the paperwork. The San Francisco Task Force also gave me a lot of paperwork on the old Patty Hearst case to go over their phone numbers and stuff like that. Long story short, the phone number here used by Anders C. Greenwood on this paperwork, I phoned, and it came to the person that answered said Tom Brown's lab, and it was at Yale University. And so I noted that because it sounded very odd to me, Tom Brown's lab. Anyway, so I made note of that. I notified the FBI of it. I called that same number back 2 hours later, and it was just because I asked for Anders C. Greenwood. I called the number back 2 hours later, it was disconnected. So I called the San Francisco FBI again and told them, says, hey, you got to look into this phone number. I might have discovered something on that.
Right.
Okay, that was off the first letter. The second letter was written on February 7, 1995. And it was to Special Agent Joyce Seymour of the FBI Unabomber Task Force, 450 Golden Gate Ave, San Francisco, California. As can be seen on the second letter, there's an address signed by Anders C. Greenwood. Anders C. Greenwood, 9517 Parsifal Place, and then it's got the 102 August Street, Hamden, Connecticut address also, with the phone numbers and the email.